Good morning, everyone. The live broadcast will start in 5 minutes. You may access the integrated report and the definitive information statement through the links in the QR codes flashed on the screen. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the annual stockholders meeting of AC Energy Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philippine National Anthem.
Tumayo po tayong lahat, ilagay ang kanang kamay sa ating dibdib at sabay-sabay nating awitin ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyang ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw. May dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng luwalhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Let us welcome Mr. Fernando Zobel de Ayala, Chairman of the Board of Directors, for the opening remarks.
Good morning. The meeting will now come to order. It is my pleasure to welcome our stockholders to the 2021 Annual Stockholders Meeting of AC Energy Corporation. Each year, we look forward to this opportunity to engage with you all. Because of restrictions to address the COVID-19 pandemic and the utmost importance that we place on the health and well-being of our employees, our stockholders, and partners, we're holding this meeting in a fully virtual format. Of course, in whatever format we hold our stockholders meeting, we do everything to ensure that our stockholders can freely exercise their right to vote and to be informed. Our stockholders may vote using the electronic voting in absentia and shareholder system until the end of the meeting, and questions may be sent to corpsec.acen@acenergy.com.ph. Joining me in this meeting as presenters are John Eric Francia, our CEO and President, Solomon Hermosura, our Corporate Secretary, Doji Lagaso, Assistant Corporate Secretary, our independent directors, namely Consuelo Garcia, the chairperson of the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee, Maria Aurora Giotina Garcia, the chairperson of the Audit Committee, Sherisa Nuesa, the chairperson of the Board Risk Management and RPT Committee, and Melinda Ocampo. The other members of our board, namely Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, our vice chairman, Jose Rene Gregory Almendras, John Philip Orbeta, and Nicole Go Fight Kim. The officers of the corporation and the representatives of CICIP Gorres Velayo and Company, our external auditor, who will validate the voting results, are joining the meeting through live webcast. Before we proceed, let us establish that this meeting is duly convened. Mr. Secretary, have the stockholders of the corporation been duly notified of this meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, our stockholders have been duly notified of this meeting. On March 25, 2021, we sent to our stockholders of record as of March 19, 2021, the notice of the annual stockholders meeting and the definitive information statement in 3 ways. First, by email to all stockholders who have given us their email addresses. Second, by posting on our corporation's website. And third, by disclosure in the Philippine Stock Exchange EDGE system. In addition, the notice was published on March 25, 2021 in the Philippine Daily Inquirer and the Philippine Star, and on March 26, 2021 in the Manila Bulletin and again in the Philippine Star, all newspapers of general circulation. Accordingly, Mr. Chairman, we have notified our stockholders of this meeting in accordance with our bylaws and applicable rules, including our internal guidelines on participation in a stockholders meeting by remote communication and voting in absentia under extraordinary circumstances, which are embodied in our definitive information statement that our Securities and Exchange Commission approved.
Thank you. Do we have a quorum at this meeting?
Yes, we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. Present in this meeting are stockholders participating by remote communication, by proxy, or by voting in absentia, owning at least 15,995,614,219 shares, representing 80.14% of the total outstanding shares. We will reflect in the minutes the breakdown of the stockholders present in terms of their mode of attendance and the percentage of the outstanding shares that they own, as well as the number of those joining us in the live webcast of this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Though we are holding this meeting in a virtual format, we have strived to provide our stockholders the opportunity to participate in this meeting to the same extent possible as an in-person meeting. Our Corporate Secretary, Mr. Hermosura, will now share the rules of conduct and voting procedures for this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the rules of conduct and voting procedures are set forth in the definitive information statement and in the explanation of agenda items, which forms part of the notice of the annual stockholders meeting. I would just like, Mr. Chairman, to highlight to our stockholders who are joining us on our live webcast the following points. The agenda for this meeting covers a range of matters requiring stockholders' vote and was included in the notice sent to stockholders. Stockholders were also provided an opportunity to propose matters for inclusion in the agenda pursuant to applicable laws, rules, and regulations and our internal guidelines. Stockholders who registered under the voting in absentia and shareholder system and notified the corporation by email to corpsec.asen@acenergy.com.ph by April 14, 2021 of their intention to participate in this meeting by remote communication may send their questions or comments to the same email address. Doji Lagaso, our Assistant Corporate Secretary, will read the questions or comments received before 9:30 a.m. during the Q&A period, which will take place after other matters under item 14 of the agenda. Management will reply to questions and comments not taken up during the meeting by email. As indicated in the ballot for the voting of stockholders, there are 13 resolutions proposed for adoption by the stockholders in this meeting. Each proposed resolution will be shown on the screen as the same is being taken up. Stockholders could cast their votes on these proposed resolutions and in the election of directors beginning April 12, 2021 through our VIA system. Stockholders participating today via live feed may cast their votes using the same system. The polls will remain open until the end of this meeting for stockholders who had successfully registered in the VIA system. Alternatively, we have also provided the stockholders the option to appoint the chairman as proxy. We have tabulated the votes cast as of 6 p.m. of yesterday, April 18, 2021. Those votes are from stockholders owning 15,995,614,219 voting shares, representing 80.14% of the total outstanding voting shares. I will be referring to this preliminary tabulation when I report the voting results throughout this meeting. The results of the final tabulation of votes with full details of the affirmative and negative votes and abstentions will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held on April 20, 2020. An electronic copy is available on the website of the corporation. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the results on the voting of this item.
Mr. Chairman, for the approval of the minutes of the annual meeting on April 20, 2020, management is proposing the adoption of resolution number S-2021-001. The resolution is shown on the screen. Shareholders owning 15,981,851,776 shares or 80.07% of the total outstanding shares have voted in favor of resolution number S-2021-001. Therefore, the resolution has been approved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next item on the agenda is the annual report, which consists of three parts: the message from the chairman, the president's report, and an audio-visual presentation. At this point, allow me to share my pre-recorded message. Esteemed shareholders, my colleagues on the board and management, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. After more than a year, the COVID-19 pandemic remains as the most challenging crisis we have all faced in recent times in terms of its unprecedented impact to human life as well as our healthcare and economic system. Amidst the continuing challenges, we recognize the tremendous sacrifice and service of our many healthcare and economic frontliners. We deeply appreciate all that you continue to do for the country. On behalf of the entire Ayala Group, allow me to also give my sincere thanks to the entire AC Energy team for your unwavering commitment to go the extra mile to ensure stable and reliable access to power for our communities, especially during these times. We extend our deepest gratitude to our various energy frontliners, some of whom have had to stay at our power plants and away from their families for several months in order to provide power for commerce, industry, and everyone working and schooling from home. We also thank our colleagues at AC Energy for going beyond the call of duty and contributing resources in the fight against COVID-19. Your assistance in establishing treatment facilities early during the pandemic was greatly appreciated. These same facilities are now crucial once again as we face a new surge of infections. I am delighted to see the strong spirit of bayanihan in our organization, and I hope that we can sustain this moving forward. Once again, our deepest thanks to all of you. As our understanding of the pandemic deepens, I believe that there is now a renewed appreciation of the interconnectedness of communities and the infrastructure that hold these together. We are now recognizing that complex global emergencies such as the pandemic, economic inequality, and climate change trace their roots to failures in fully integrating sustainability principles to decision-making and operations. In the same vein, embracing sustainability will be our way forward in addressing these intricate global challenges. I am encouraged that several governments and private institutions, including many in the Philippines, are renewing their commitments to these same principles. Thus, amidst plans to revive our economy, I believe that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build back better towards a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive future as we steadily move to a post-COVID world. Sustainable recovery is now seen as perhaps our best and only way forward to achieve our environmental goals to mitigate climate change, to create jobs, build economic resilience, and ultimately improve the well-being of people. I am delighted that AC Energy has made significant progress along these fronts and continues to be recognized as a key contributor to sustainable growth and development. For the past year, AC Energy Corporation, or ACEN, remained focused on its renewables growth strategy through continuous renewable energy investments. Despite the difficult year, the company earmarked 10 billion pesos in capex. We augmented our generating capacity with the construction of 2 new solar plants, battery storage and firming facilities in Luzon. This brings ASEN's total attributable capacity to 1,034 megawatts, with almost half of the capacity coming from renewable sources. Our 2020 investments created more than 3,000 jobs within our host communities and continue to be vital pieces towards reigniting the economy and creating economic activity. As the country looks ahead to bounce back quickly from the pandemic, ASEN remains strongly committed to our vision of a sustainable energy future. In fact, we believe that this commitment is more important now than ever. Towards this end, we built our sustainability framework on 3 focus areas embedded across our business: operations, governance, and culture. We aim to have a low-carbon portfolio by 2030, protect the environment, and invest in our host communities. My brother Jaime and I recently visited our pilot sustainability hub in the 120-megawatt Gigasol plant being constructed in Alaminos, Laguna. We see this hub as a clear example of shared value coming to life and the potential it holds for creating meaningful impact and lasting change. It was inspiring and touching to see the high levels of engagement of the local community and the warm reception that our solar farm investment received. We are excited to work with our host and neighboring communities to develop programs for livelihood, sustainability, and resilience. Before I give the floor to AC Energy's President and CEO, Mr. Eric Francia, allow me to acknowledge our outgoing member of the board, Mr. Jerry Ablasa. Jerry's guidance helped shape AC Energy to what it is today, most especially over the last few years of tremendous growth. We thank you for your guidance and support, Jerry. Joining our board will be Ms. Nicole Go of GIC Private Limited, ASEN's newest investment manager. Welcome, Ms. Go. We are delighted to have you and GIC on board, and we're excited to see how our organizations might lead the region's energy transition. Once again, I thank the entire AC Energy organization and its management team for a milestone 2020, despite the many challenges. We still have quite a journey ahead towards our full recovery, but I am encouraged that we have built a solid platform from which to continue our growth as a company while contributing to the progress of the country. On behalf of the board of directors, the management, and our entire team, I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation to our shareholders and our many stakeholders for your continued trust and support. We remain committed to play a role in accelerating our recovery post-COVID, as well as in the sustainable energy transition. I now turn over to Eric Francia for his president's report.
Good morning, everyone. Please allow me to present my report, which has also been pre-recorded. Fellow shareholders, colleagues from board and management, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. 2020 was an exceptionally difficult year for everyone, and I would like to thank the men and women of AC Energy who remain committed to deliver amidst the unprecedented challenges and for living the true spirit of Bayanihan along with the rest of the Ayala Group. While the challenges persist, we have learned to cope, adapt, and continue to progress with our transformational journey at AC Energy. On a brighter note, 2020 was an extraordinary turnaround year for the company. AC Energy Corporation registered a record 3.75 billion pesos in net income. The exceptional performance was driven by 3 factors. First, the company was able to achieve significant improvement in operating efficiencies and reliability. Plant availability increased by 29 percentage points for our thermal assets. These improvements were born out of the plant renewal initiatives that the company carried out when we started the transformation journey in the middle of 2019. Second, the company significantly improved its operating margins. This was largely driven by the ability to secure longer-term contracts that provide more stable cash flows. Our agile energy portfolio also allowed the strategic sourcing of competitive price electricity and fuel to help improve margins. And third, the company successfully completed the acquisition of additional stakes in 3 renewable projects in early 2020. The North Luzon Renewables Wind Farm in Ilocos Norte and the Sacasol and Islasol solar farms in Negros Occidental. These acquisitions, with a total investment of 7.4 billion pesos, were earnings accretive given the operational status of the power plants. To further augment its generating capacity, and notwithstanding the pandemic, the company carried out the construction of 5 projects through 2020, totaling around 374 megawatts of gross capacity. These projects include the 121 megawatt solar project and the 40 megawatt hour battery storage project in Alaminos, Laguna, the 60 megawatt solar project in Palawig, Zambales, and the 150 megawatt quick response thermal plant in Pililla, Rizal. The company is also constructing a renewable energy laboratory in Mariveles, Bataan, equivalent to a 4 megawatt hybrid solar plant integrated with an energy storage system, which will test various new technologies in solar and battery storage. This will help the company select the best technologies as it scales up its investments in solar and storage in the coming decade. With all of these capacity additions, AC Energy now has over 1,000 megawatts of attributable capacity in the Philippines, with almost half of this capacity coming from renewable sources. We expect the share of renewables to significantly grow over time as the company focuses on scaling up its investments in solar and wind farms. The company has also recently reaffirmed the March 2020 board decision to infuse the international assets of its parent, AC Energy and Infrastructure Corporation. The international assets is comprised of approximately 1,400 megawatts of attributable capacity in operations and under construction across multiple geographies, including Vietnam, Indonesia, Australia, and India. 100% of these capacities are from renewable sources, particularly solar, wind, and geothermal. After the infusion is completed, this will increase AC Energy's attributable capacity to 2,400 megawatts, of which over 1,800 megawatts, or 77%, is from renewable sources. This puts AC Energy in an excellent position to attain its vision of reaching 5 gigawatts of renewables by 2025 and realize our aspiration of becoming the largest listed renewables platform in Southeast Asia. In order to achieve our bold ambition, the company is further strengthening its balance sheet and augmenting its cash position. In January of 2021, the company completed its stock rights offering that raised 5.4 billion pesos from the issuance of 2.27 billion primary shares. This was followed by the successful completion of a private placement of 4 billion primary shares to GIC, which is Singapore's sovereign wealth fund. The private placement added around 11.9 billion pesos of cash, resulting in a total of 17.3 billion pesos of additional cash in the first quarter of 2021. The planned infusion of the international assets and the recent fundraising will further grow the company's balance sheet by about 3.5 times. Our strong balance sheet is complemented by a robust pipeline of renewable projects and a highly capable and motivated team. This places AC Energy in an excellent position to play a meaningful role in the green-led recovery. On behalf of the company's board and management, I would like to thank the entire AC Energy team for the unparalleled commitment and the exceptional results delivered under an extraordinarily difficult situation. Thank you to our shareholders for the continuing trust and support. We are all very excited to continue this journey as we all work towards our aspiration of becoming the largest listed renewables platform in Southeast Asia. Thank you and good day.
The year 2020 emphasized the urgent need for sustainable development. Across the globe, renewable energy is now seen as the main driver of the green-led recovery. AC Energy Corporation aims to transform communities and build a greener and more resilient future. We're focused on making positive changes for the people and planet. Please watch this video.
Behold, one of the greatest forces on earth. Engineered by nature to prolong its very life. Its power elevates creatures of the air. Its strength brings wanderers across seas. Its flow keeps climates hospitable. Its intensity brings new heights to adventure. And its brute force can be transformed into silent power.
May I now ask the Secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results?
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the adoption of resolution number S-2021-002 for the noting of the corporation's annual report and the approval of the consolidated audited financial statement of the corporation and its subsidiaries and parent company financial statement of the corporation as of December 31, 2020 as audited by its external auditor, Sisip Gores Belayo and Company. The resolution is shown on the screen. Stockholders owning 15,981,974,741 shares or 80.07% of the total outstanding shares have voted for the adoption of the resolution. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S-2021-002 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We now move to the next item in the agenda, which is the ratification and approval of all the acts of our Board of Directors and officers since our annual stockholders meeting on April 20, 2020 until today. Mr. Hermosura will explain this matter and present the proposed resolution together with the voting results thereon.
Mr. Chairman, the Board of Directors and Management seek ratification of all the acts and resolutions of the Board, the Executive Committee, and other Board committees exercising powers delegated by the Board, which were adopted from April 2020 until today. These acts and resolutions are reflected in the minutes of the meetings, and they include the appointment of authorized representatives and bank signatories, treasury transactions, budget and funding plans, investments in greenfield renewable energy projects, including the 120 megawatt solar farm project in Alaminos, Laguna, the 63 megawatt solar farm project in Palawig, Zambales, and the 40 megawatt battery energy storage system project in Alaminos, Laguna, to name a few. Joint ventures for power projects such as with Marubeni Corporation and Citicorp Solar Energy Corporation, and acts and resolutions covered by disclosures to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Philippine Stock Exchange. Stockholders' ratification is also being sought for all the acts of our officers performed in the general conduct of our business or in accordance with the resolutions of the Board the Executive Committee and other board committees, as well as the bylaws from April 20, 2020 to date. These acts were performed to implement the resolutions of the board or its committees or as part of the corporation's general conduct of business. Mr. Chairman, the resolution is on the screen. Stockholders owning 15,981,928,329 shares or 80.07% of the total outstanding shares have voted for the adoption of resolution number S 2021-003. Therefore, the resolution has been adopted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The next items in the agenda are the proposed amendments to the corporation's articles of incorporation. Mr. Francia, President of the corporation, will explain these items.
Mr. Chairman, the Board of Directors has agreed to endorse two amendments to the articles of incorporation of the corporation. The first proposed amendment is the increase in authorized capital stock from 24.4 billion divided into 24.4 billion common shares to 48.4 billion pesos divided into 48.4 billion common shares. To recall, Mr. Chairman, in the last annual stockholders meeting held on April 20, 2020, the stockholders already approved this proposed amendment to enable and implement the consolidation of AC Energy and Infrastructure Corporations, or ACEIC, international business into the corporation. Given that the Board of Directors had previously approved this acquisition by the corporation of ACEIC's international business operations, currently housed under AC Energy International, Inc., through a tax-free exchange with ACEIC transferring its share of stock in AC Energy International in consideration for additional shares in the corporation, there is a need to increase the authorized capital stock of the corporation by 24 billion common shares to enable the issuance of the additional shares to ACEIC. However, due to a then pending prior application for increase in authorized capital stock in 2020 for the implementation of the first share swap between ACEIC and the corporation for the infusion of ACEIC's Philippine assets into the corporation was unable to file an application to increase its authorized capital stock with the SEC within 6 months from the date of the approval of the board, which was March 18, 2020, and the stockholders, which was on April 20, 2020, as required under the revised corporation code. According to comply with the requirement of the revised corporation code, there is a need to seek anew the approval of the stockholders for the increase in the authorized capital stock of the corporation from 24.4 billion common shares to 48.4 billion common shares.
May I now ask the Secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results?
Mr. Chairman, our Board of Directors is endorsing to our stockholders resolution number S 2021-004 for the approval by our stockholders of these two corporate actions. First, the increase of the authorized capital stock from 24.4 billion pesos divided into 24.4 billion common shares to 48.4 billion pesos divided into 48.4 billion common shares, and the amendment of the 7th article of the Articles of Incorporation for this purpose. And second, the registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of the shares that will be issued out of the increase in the authorized capital stock. The resolution is shown on the screen. Stockholders owning 15,943,427,735 shares, or 79.88% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S 2021-004. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S 2021-004 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Francia, please proceed to explain the second proposed amendment of the Articles of Incorporation for the approval of the stockholders.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the second and final proposed amendment to the Articles of Incorporation is the increase in the number of shares exempt from the preemptive right of the stockholders in relation to shares issued in exchange for property needed for corporate purposes or in payment of a previously contracted debt from 16 billion common shares to 24 billion common shares. The proposed amendment is meant, among others, to make expedient and streamline the process for the infusion by ACEIC of its international assets into the corporation, wherein the corporation will issue 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC out of the increase in the corporation's authorized capital stock earlier approved by the stockholders and subject to the necessary regulatory approvals.
Thank you, Mr. Francia. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, our board of directors is endorsing to our stockholders resolution number S-2021-005 for the approval by our stockholders of the increase of the number of shares exempt from the preemptive right of stockholders in relation to shares issued in exchange for property needed for corporate purposes or in payment of a previously contracted debt from 16 billion common shares to 24 billion common shares, and the amendment of the 7th article of the Articles of Incorporation for this purpose. The resolution is on the screen, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, stockholders owning 15,890,069,899 shares or 79.61% of the total outstanding shares have voted for the adoption of resolution number 2021-005. Given this, Mr. Chairman, the proposed amendment to the Articles of Incorporation and resolution number S-2021-005 have been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next item on the agenda is the issuance of 4 billion common shares to Aran Investment Pte. Ltd. May I ask the President to explain this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. During its meeting on November 11, 2020, the Board of Directors approved the issuance of 4 billion common shares to Aran Investment Pte. Limited. And on December 30, 2020, the corporation signed an investment agreement with Aran for this purpose. Since the shares issued to Aran do not exceed the 35% of the resulting total issued and outstanding capital stock of the corporation, such issuance is not subject to the preemptive right of stockholders in accordance with the second paragraph of Article 7 of the Articles of Incorporation. To recall, Mr. Chairman, on March 18, 2021, the corporation and Aran signed a subscription agreement for the issuance of 4 billion primary common shares to Aran in accordance with the investment agreement, which resulted in Aran acquiring a 20.4% ownership interest in the corporation. Aran is an affiliate of GIC Private Limited, a private limited company established in 1981 to manage Singapore's foreign reserves. Aran is an investment holding company for investments managed by GIC or GIC's wholly owned subsidiaries and primarily holds investments which are managed by the private equity and infrastructure arm of GIC. The private placement enabled the corporation to raise additional capital to fund its various developmental and operating projects, as well as potential acquisitions. The entry of Aran as an institutional investor will also strengthen the corporation's investor base.
Thank you, Mr. Francia. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, our Board of Directors is endorsing for approval of our stockholders resolution number S-2021-006 for these corporate actions. First, the issuance of 4 billion common shares to Aran Investment Private Limited. And second, the registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of the shares issued to ARAN. The resolution is shown on the screen. I'm pleased to report, Mr. Chairman, that stockholders owning 15,885,909,199 shares, or 79.59% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2020-006. Therefore, the resolution has been adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next order of business is the issuance of 1,580,000,000 primary common shares pursuant to the corporation's follow-on offering. Mr. Francia, the President, will explain this item.
Mr. Chairman, during its meeting on March 18, 2021, the Board of Directors approved the issuance of 1,580,000,000 primary common shares pursuant to the planned follow-on offering of the corporation with a secondary shares component of up to 420 million common shares. To recall, on February 3, 2021, pursuant to the authority delegated by the Board of Directors in connection with the planned follow-on offering, the Executive Committee approved a price range of 6 pesos to 8 pesos and 20 centavos per share. On February 8, 2021, the corporation submitted a registration statement for up to 2,430,248,617 common shares, including the primary and secondary shares with over-allotment with the SEC. And finally, on March 18, 2021, the board approved the firmed-up primary share issuance size of 1,580,000,000 common shares. The corporation expects to raise gross proceeds of up to 12,956,000,000 pesos from the sale of 1,580,000,000 primary shares. The proceeds will be used by the corporation to partially fund the development of its power projects in the pipeline and inorganic growth opportunities, if and when they arise, the repayment of loans and reduction of payables, and other general corporate requirements. The corporation will not receive any proceeds from the sale of the secondary shares by the selling stockholders.
Thank you, Mr. Francia. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, our Board of Directors is endorsing for the approval of our stockholders resolution number S-2021-007 for these corporate actions. First, the issuance of 1,580,000,000 primary common shares pursuant to the corporation's follow-on offering. And second, the registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of the shares to be issued therefore. The resolution is shown on the screen. On the voting results, Mr. Chairman, stockholders owning 15,943,425,535 shares, or 79.88% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number 2021-007. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number 2021-007 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next item in the agenda is the issuance of 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC in exchange for ACEIC's international renewable energy assets and investments. May I ask the President to explain this item?
Mr. Chairman, in late 2020, ACEIC and the corporation completed the infusion by ACEIC of its Philippine energy assets and investments into the corporation via a tax-free property for share swap. In line with the objective of constituting the corporation as the consolidated listed platform for Ayala's Philippine and international renewable assets and investments, on March 18, 2021, the Board of Directors approved the consolidation of ACEIC's international renewable energy assets and investments into the corporation. And for this purpose, the issuance of 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC out of the increase in capital stock of the corporation at a subscription price of 5.15 pesos per share, or an aggregate subscription price of 85,931,872,744.95 pesos, in exchange for ACEIC's 1,650,166,347 common shares and 15,035,347,600 redeemable preferred shares in AC Energy International, Inc. AC Energy International is the holding company for all of ACEIC's renewable energy assets and investments across the Asia-Pacific region, with various assets already in operation, particularly in Indonesia and Vietnam, projects under construction in India, Vietnam, and Australia, and a healthy pipeline of projects in various stages of development in other countries in the Asia-Pacific region. By acquiring 100% of the outstanding capital stock of AC Energy International from ACEIC, the corporation will acquire full ownership of ACEIC's international renewable energy business that will complete the transformation of the corporation as Ayala's single-listed platform for both its Philippine and international renewable energy business. In support of the share swap involving ACEIC's international business, the corporation and ACEIC commissioned FTI Consulting Philippines, Inc., an independent third-party valuer, duly accredited by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Philippine Stock Exchange, to prepare a fairness opinion as to the valuation of the corporation's business and that of the international assets that ACEIC will be infusing into the corporation, with December 31, 2020 as the valuation date. The fairness opinion served as a basis for the Board of Directors' approval of the issuance of 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC at a subscription price of 5.15 per share, or an aggregate subscription price of 85,931,872,744.95 pesos. Moreover, the subscription price of 5.15 pesos per share is close to the 60-day volume-weighted average price of 5.33 per share as of the valuation date of December 31, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Francia. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, our Board of Directors is endorsing for the approval of our stockholders resolution number S-2021-008 for these corporate actions. First, the issuance of 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC out of the increase in capital stock of the corporation at a subscription price of 85,931,872,744.95 in exchange for ACEIC's 1,160,166,347 common shares and 15,035,347,600 redeemable preferred shares in AC Energy International. And second, the registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of the shares to be issued therefore. The resolution is shown on the screen. On the voting results, Mr. Chairman, stockholders owning 15,943,423,253 shares, or 79.88% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2021-008. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number 2021-008 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next order of business is the proposed waiver of the requirement to conduct a rights or public offering of shares in relation to the issuance of 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC in exchange for ACEIC's international renewable energy assets and investment. May I request the President to explain this item?
Mr. Chairman, given the approval to issue 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC, with ACEIC being a party related to the corporation, the consolidated listing in disclosure rules of the Philippine Stock Exchange require the conduct of a rights or public offering of shares unless a waiver to conduct such rights or public offering of shares is obtained from majority of the minority stockholders present or represented in a stockholders meeting for this purpose. Management requests the stockholders to waive the requirements of a rights or public offering of shares to enable the infusion by ACEIC of its international assets and investments into the corporation and the completion of the transformation of the corporation as Ayala's single listed platform for its Philippine and international renewable energy business. As explained earlier, the asset infusion will be done via tax-free exchange, and the waiver of the requirement of conduct of rights or public offering of shares will greatly facilitate the international asset infusion into the corporation that will not only greatly improve the current asset base of the corporation, but will also enable the corporation to expand its business internationally in line with the corporation's target to become the largest listed renewables platform in Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Mr. Francia. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, management is endorsing for the approval of our stockholders resolution number S-2021-009 for the waiver of the requirement to conduct a rights or public offering of shares in relation to the issuance of 16,685,800,533 common shares to ACEIC in exchange for ACEIC's international renewable energy assets and investments. The resolution is shown on the screen. On the voting results, Mr. Chairman, stockholders owning 15,895,727,311 shares, or 79.62% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2021-009. In addition, minority stockholders owning 616,836,888 shares, or 86.60% of the 712,290,016 shares owned by minority stockholders present or represented in this meeting, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2021-009. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S-2020-009 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next order of business is the stock ownership plan and the allocation of 960 million common shares of the corporation for this purpose. Mr. Francia will explain this item.
Mr. Chairman, during its meeting on March 18, 2021, the Board of Directors approved the stock ownership plan of the corporation and the allocation of 960 million common shares from the unsubscribed portion of the corporation's authorized capital stock for this purpose. The stock ownership plan is intended to be implemented by the corporation starting with the performance year 2020 and beyond that. Grantees are qualified executives, managers, staff, or consultants of the corporation and its affiliates and subsidiaries, subject to satisfaction of certain eligibility requirements. The availment terms of the stock ownership plan, including annual allocation, prices, and other material conditions upon which the option may be exercised, will be reviewed and approved by the Personnel and Compensation Committee for endorsement for the board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Francia. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution on this item and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, our Board of Directors is endorsing to our stockholders Resolution number S 2021-0010, for the approval by our stockholders of number 1, the stock ownership plan, and 2, the registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of the shares to be issued and allocated for the stock ownership plan. The resolution is shown on the screen. On the voting results, stockholders owning 15,910,467,225 shares, or 79.71% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2021-010. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S-2021-010 has been adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next order of business is the proposed delegation to the Board of Directors of the power to amend the corporation's bylaws. Mr. Hermosura will explain this matter and present the proposed resolution together with the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Article 8 of our bylaws, our Board of Directors has endorsed for approval of the stockholders the delegation of authority to amend the corporation's bylaws. Amendments that may be proposed include but are not limited to ensuring alignment of the bylaws with the provisions of the revised corporation code, establishing rules of conduct for fully virtual meetings, enabling the election of other offices such as compliance officers, assistant corporate secretaries, and assistant treasurers, and establishing their duties and functions, and allowing the payment of cash dividends through electronic means. Mr. Chairman, we are showing on the screen resolution number S-2021-011 for the delegation of authority to the Board of Directors to amend the corporation's bylaws. On the voting results, Mr. Chairman, stockholders owning 15,885,909,199 shares, or 79.59% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2021-011. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S-2021-011 has been adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next order of business is the election of the 11 members of the Board of Directors for the ensuing year. Mr. Hermosura will explain this item.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with our bylaws, Manual of Corporate Governance, and the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the following stockholders were duly nominated to the Board of Directors of the corporation for the ensuing term: Fernando Sobel de Ayala, Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala, Jose Rene Gregory D. Almendras, Cesar P. Consing, John Eric T. Francia, John Philip S. Orbeta, Nicole Go Pek Kim, Consuelo D. Garcia, Maria Aurora Jutina Garcia, Sherisa Pinuesa, Melinda L. Ocampo. Ms. Garcia, Ms. Jutina Garcia, Ms. Nuesa, and Ms. Ocampo have been nominated as independent directors. The Corporate Governance and Nomination Committee of the Board has ascertained that the 11 nominees, including the 4 nominees for independent directors, are qualified to serve as directors of the corporation. All the nominees have given their consent to their nominations.
Mr. Secretary, may we have the results of the election?
Mr. Chairman, each of the 11 nominees for director has garnered at least 11,930,086,204 votes. Given this, I certify, Mr. Chairman, that each of the nominees has received enough votes for election to the board, and that resolution number S-2021-012 for the election of the 11 nominees to the board has been approved. We are showing resolution number S-2021-012 on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, I would also like to thank Tony Paner for his valuable contributions as an independent director of the corporation and would like to welcome Bong Consing as our newest director. Bong recently joined the Ayala Corporation Board, and we're delighted, Bong, to have you in the AC Energy Board as well. The next item in the agenda is the appointment of the corporation's external auditor. Mr. Masura will explain this item and present the proposed resolution together with the voting results thereof.
Mr. Chairman, the external auditor plays a key role in undertaking an independent audit of the corporation and in providing an objective assurance on the corporation's financial statements. The audit committee exercises oversight over the company's external auditors, including assessing their integrity and independence and the effectiveness of their audit process. Mr. Chairman, in the performance of this oversight function, the audit committee evaluated the performance of our present auditor, the firm of Sisip Gores Belayo and Company, during the past year, and the committee was satisfied with their performance. The committee and the board of directors have agreed to endorse for our stockholders' approval the appointment of Sisip Gores Belayo and Company as external auditor for 2021 for an audit fee of up to 1,755,750 pesos, exclusive of value-added tax and out-of-pocket expenses. Mr. Chairman, we are showing on the screen resolution number S-2021-013. And I am pleased to report, Mr. Chairman, that stockholders owning 15,981,854,674 shares, or 80.07% of the total outstanding shares, have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2021-013. Therefore, resolution number S-2021-013 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, are there other matters that require consideration by the stockholders?
There is none, Mr. Chairman. Anybody may mention? We provided the stockholders the opportunity to propose items for inclusion in the agenda, but we received no proposals, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As there are no other items for consideration, we can now address questions and comments from the stockholders. Our Assistant Corporate Secretary, Mr. Lagaso, will read aloud the questions and comments together with the names of the stockholders who sent them. As mentioned by Mr. Masura earlier, management will reply by email to questions and comments not taken up during this meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we received several questions from stockholders. Two of these questions were sent by a stockholder who identified himself as Romualdo L. Bea. His first question is whether ASEN has a dividend policy.
Yes, as of last year, during our board meetings, we established that the dividend policy will consist of anywhere between 25% to 50% of previous year's net income, excluding non-recurring gains in a particular year. We're doing this so that we can maintain enough capital in the corporation for our aggressive expansion. We may also consider special dividends once in a while, if so warranted and if appropriate with our balance sheet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bea's second question is why the 2019 financial statements were restated.
Could I ask Ms. Cora Dizon to handle that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 2019 financial statements were restated in order to reflect the retroactive impact of the infusion of the Philippine Power assets from parent company ACEIC into the corporation as if the transaction happened in July 2019. This is in line with the company's accounting policy for business combinations, applying the pooling of interest. It was starting July 2019 when common control existed over the corporation and the Philippine assets.
Thank you, Ms. Dizon. Mr. Chairman, another stockholder who identified himself as Mr. Van Allen P. de la Cruz also sent two questions. His first question Why did the company decide to pursue a renewable energy portfolio? And will you consider going into other technologies as well?
Just let me start with that, and then I'll pass it on to Eric. We all know that there's been an enormous amount of momentum into clean energy to try and resolve the problems of climate change that we're experiencing all over the world. And we felt that we had a great opportunity with this platform to go into the renewable space, which has come down dramatically in price over the years, and where we are seeing a very rapid shift among all the different companies, not companies, governments in Southeast Asia, shifting from thermal to renewables. So we've decided to take advantage of this space and aim to become a leader, as we've mentioned in our speeches, in this space in Southeast Asia. Eric, could I ask you to talk about some of the other technologies that you're also looking at?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We are currently focused on scaling up our investments, particularly in solar and wind. That is where we expect to make significant investments in renewables. Having said that, given the intermittent nature or the variable nature of solar and wind, we believe that this has to be complemented to really unlock the potential of renewables. This would have to be complemented by battery storage. And we have already begun to invest in battery storage as presented in the report earlier. We're building a 40 megawatt hour facility in Alaminos to co-located with our solar plant there. We're also building a, hopefully completing within the year, the renewable energy laboratory. It's a 4 megawatt hour facility, 4 megawatt facility that includes different kinds of technologies in solar technology as well as battery storage, so that we will really learn in the real world performance of the various technologies. Because we believe that if we prepare ourselves in terms of scaling up all of these technologies, the new technologies, we want to make sure that we understand them in real world setting. So this is an exciting period, Mr. Chair and our dear shareholders. We are prepared to really invest heavily in renewables led by solar and wind and the various technologies within those, and complemented with battery storage, Mr. Chair.
Next question, please, Doji.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. De La Cruz also commented that we have seen a very encouraging trend in the market price of ASEAN shares from 2020. What forecasts, if any, does the company have for this year? What projects and or plans, if any, does the company intend to implement to maintain this trend?
Well, we cannot give firm guidance on share prices or financial results, but we can say, and I think you've seen it from the presentations, that we have a very exciting lineup of projects ahead of us and very aggressive targets by 2025. So that's the part that we can reveal and shows a great deal of momentum in the company.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another stockholder who identified himself as Rafael Guillermo asked whether the company has plans to further expand overseas.
I'll ask Eric to comment on that. Let me just say, though, that the Philippines will always continue to be our core market, but we are seeing great opportunities in the different countries that Eric showed us in his presentation. Perhaps, Eric, you could talk more about that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Definitely, given now that we have approved the infusion of the international platform of ACEIC into the company, we are really poised well to realize our vision of becoming the largest listed renewables platform in Southeast Asia. Today, we have around close to 500 megawatts of renewables in the Philippines. Once we complete the infusion of international assets, that would add another 1,400 megawatts. So we would be at 1,900 megawatts already. and we will expand both in the Philippines but also around the region. We're currently present in Vietnam, Indonesia, Australia, India, and Myanmar. These markets provide significant opportunities as they all go through the renewable energy transition. As an example, in Vietnam, the market pre-pandemic has been growing at around 10% growth, the power sector. And recently, the government of Vietnam really focused on scaling up its renewables investments and firmed up with a very compelling policy. So it is the hottest renewable market in Southeast Asia. And Vietnam has grown tremendously over the last 2 years in terms of solar and wind. In the case of Australia, they are going through an energy transition. They have a lot of old coal plants that are reaching the end of technical life and expected to be decommissioned in the next 2 decades. And this will need to be replaced by renewables, which is the most competitive technology in Australia today. And again, the opportunities in Australia are large. Not to say that in the Philippines, obviously, the opportunities remain huge, especially with the renewable portfolio standards, which is part of the renewable energy law being scaled up. And that is why, given all of these opportunities, not only in the Philippines, but around the region, AC Energy Corporation has been quite aggressive in terms of raising the capital in preparation really for all of these opportunities that will come our way in the next 5 to 10 years. So again, this is a very exciting time. It's good to have a strong balance sheet. We have a very strong team. We have a strong pipeline across the portfolio, and we have very strong partnerships. I believe that all of these elements will allow us to really play a leading role in this energy transition and the green-led recovery.
Next question, please, Doji.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received a last question sent by Ms. Joylyn Talagan, and she is asking for updates on the follow-on offering of the corporation.
Eric, could I ask you to answer that, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We are currently working through the regulatory approvals. We have previously filed in our prospectus a target listing date of May 14, which is less than a month from now. So we're hoping to get regulatory approvals fairly soon. Of course, the timing will have to be subject to the regulatory decisions, but the team is working hard to make sure that we meet the said timeline.
Thank you. Doji, any more questions?
That was the last question, Mr. Chairman, that we received before the cut-off time. As mentioned earlier, questions that we receive after the cut-off time will be answered by the Corporate Secretary via email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes this morning's proceedings. The meeting is hereby adjourned. The link to the audio and video recording of this meeting will be posted on our website. Stockholders may raise issues, clarifications, and concerns about this meeting within 2 weeks from the posting of the link by sending an email to corpsec.asen@acenergy.com.ph. Thank you for joining us in today's annual stockholders meeting. AC Energy is a stronger organization through your continued trust and support. We look forward to working with all of you towards a green-led recovery for the nation. Thank you once again. Keep safe, and I wish everyone a good day. Thank you all.